Welcome back to Iconicon. This is Analog Toys, and I'm Tony Roberts, and I have had a complete visual makeover.
And I'm Michael French, and I also have had a complete visual makeover.
And on the stream with
I'm
us,
still Matt Movies.
Are you? Because I was really sure that you were one of our celebrity guests from just a few days ago, also in disguise. All right, everybody.
So do you want to explain why Tony is
Yes, let me explain why Tony's not here. For those of you that were on the previous stream, that was also Analog Toys, that was the G.I. Joe debate, which I also hosted. Tony has been a victim of the airline crisis here in the United States. His flight to Valaverse HQ yesterday was canceled unceremoniously, and he had to find a new flight, and that conflicted with, unfortunately, his Iconicon streams today. So I drove him to the airport again this morning at 3 a.m.
It's already been a long day for you.
I have sacrificed my comprehension and my ability to think for all of you and for Analog Toys. So I'm going to be leaning heavily on my very trusted friend, Matt Kearns from MattMovies611, and my wife and Sylvester Stallone expert, Melinda, to keep me from looking the fool here. All right, so here we go. We're doing War Stories, Rambo 3. So now, for those of you that haven't seen Rambo 3, it is a movie that is over 30 years old, so we are not going to be worrying about spoilers here. If you haven't seen it, you should go watch it. That being said, who wants to give us a brief synopsis of the film Rambo 3? Who would like to go?
Matt, did you want to do it? I'm happy to do it.
I mean, you go right ahead, Melinda. You
can... Oh, God. I always volunteer for things, then I'm like, why did I do this? So Rambo 3 sees John Rambo, who is trying to sort of find some peace and live in this lovely monastery in Thailand, approached once again by Troutman, played by Richard Crenna, to help out with this mission in Afghanistan to help some folks who were being really bombed by the Russians, who actually during the late 80s had invaded Afghanistan. During the filming of this movie, that was actually going on, so it was a very timely plot, which ended up hurting the movie, but we'll get to that. But yeah, so he says no, much like in Rambo 4. He's like, nah, my war's over. Troutman goes anyway. He gets captured. Rambo has to go rescue him. Hilarity ensues. There's like a lot of giant warship, gunship, helicopter / airplane looking things flying around in a desert scene, like blowing up tanks. And Stallone amped up the tanks to make them go like 50 miles an hour, even though they only actually go 20 miles an hour. It's pretty over the top action. It was, at the time the movie was made, it was one of the most violent movies ever made. It made the Guinness Book for most violent film ever made, as well as one of the most, at that time, expensive films ever made. I think it was 63. Is it how much was the?
Sorry, I'll pull up the numbers. Let's do the numbers, everyone. The Rambo box office.
We don't want to rely on Melinda's memory.
It's a $63 million budget.
That's what I was going to say, but I was like, is that way too much? I'm really tired as well. Yeah, so $63 million. I mean, obviously, it made its money back and then some, so it didn't do badly at the box office. But
well, it says its domestic total was $53 million and its worldwide was 53. Well, that's interesting.
That's not what other sources say, though.
Yeah.
Other sources say it had like much more, like $180-something million.
Right.
So
because there has to be an international number that's just missing here. So yeah.
Yeah, I think so. But I just pulled that just so we would have something to show from Box Office Mojo this morning. But yeah, so he goes in and he rescues Troutman, and he
defeats the evil Russian general.
The Russian general, and then he leaves and goes back home to Arizona. And that is the short synopsis of the movie. Yeah.
So for those of you that haven't seen the Rambo films in a while or haven't seen them at all, it's important to note that in the very first film, he is a man who has returned home to the United States, and he's been living there several years, but hasn't been able to find his footing again, as most Vietnam veterans had trouble doing. and he's harassed by a local sheriff in a small town after finding out that his last war buddy died. And the sheriff begins to arrest him, give him a hard time, accuse him of vagrancy. Rambo PTSDs, because of his trauma. He is a, Green Beret, and he runs out into the woods, escaping this police station, and they proceed to try and hunt him. And he makes life very difficult for them. He is subsequently incarcerated between the two movies in a kind of work camp for, I guess it's a prison, really.
Yeah. He gets put in prison, but they get him out early.
They get him out
of Rambo 2.
Yeah, they get him out early for Rambo 2 because they found Vietnam POWs still in a prison camp in Vietnam, and they send Rambo in to go get them. Rambo finds out that they actually don't want to rescue them. It's all just a bait and switch. They really just want to disavow all knowledge of these prisoners. So Rambo then gets really mad. He gets captured by the Russians because his own government's mercenaries leave him behind when he should be picked up and rescued. But in typical Rambo fashion, he both escapes the POW camp, rescues all the POWs, comes back and gives the crappy mercenary guys what for.
Yeah.
And then after that, he walks off into the jungle, says he's not going back to the United States with Troutman. And in Rambo 3, we pick up with Troutman realizing there's a situation in Afghanistan that has to be dealt with, and he wants Rambo's help. And Rambo is in Laos, or is it Thailand?
I think it's Thailand.
It's Thailand. Rambo's in Thailand, stick fighting. He spends some of his time stick fighting, and then he spends the rest of his time helping the local monks through his winnings rebuild their monastery, and it's quiet work. So before we get into the details of each scene, I wanted to ask both of you, we'll start with Matt. I wanted to ask you the first time you saw this film and what you thought of it when you saw it.
So the first time I saw it would have been in late high school. Right after I saw that movie, and then I learned there were all these other
cut out there for
Rambo
a second,
movies.
Matt.
Oh.
You cut out for a second. Can you
Sorry.
say that again?
Sure. The first time I saw this movie was late high school, early college, after I saw First Blood, and I learned there were other Rambo movies, and I came to learn that the other were familiar with before, because there's the arcade game, which is based off of this movie, and all the iconography was more from Rambo 2. The shirtless, red bandana with the arrows. And 4 was out by that point. So I think I saw that one as well. It shows you how well I remember it. And I liked 2 and 3, but they were such a step down from the first movie. The first movie is still one of my favorite films of all time, and so I don't really go back and revisit these movies. It's been a number of years since I saw Rambo 3. But we'll get into, I guess, my thoughts on it as we go through this war story.
What about you?
I don't remember the first time I saw this one. I think it was probably in the 90s, even though this film came out in 88. I was in Alaska. I may have seen it in the theater, but I just don't recall. I know I've seen it a number of times. Obviously, I'm a Stallone fan. I'm a Rambo fan. I think this movie gets a lot of hate that's not necessarily justified. I know Tony discussed with us what his ranking of all the Rambo films are, and I don't know if we want to talk about that right now, if we want to save that till the end, how we rank all the Rambo films. But I think that this is, it's certainly a very violent film. It does have some issues. It has some behind the scenes weird stuff that was going on, which leads to a lot of those issues, I think. But I think it's a good Rambo movie. I mean, it's way better than the second installment, and I know that the second one is usually the one that people think of when they think of this franchise. But I mean, I think this movie is better than the second one.
Yeah, I think this movie ages better than the second one. The first time that I saw it was probably in the early 90s at some point on a movie channel.
Yeah.
But I think I saw it when I lived in England, as a matter of fact, on Sky, and watched the whole thing. I may have actually seen most of this movie. I'd seen clips of part 2. I'd seen part 1. But part 3 was one that I remember more vividly than part 2 at the time. I never really saw why people disliked this movie. When I watched it, I thought it was a very solid action film.
Yep.
I didn't really understand why people claimed not to like it at the time. I think this movie has aged far better because of circumstances in the world. It's become far more poignant. At the time, it seemed like a daring statement to make, I'm sure, but it's actually a rather prophetic movie and very poignant in many ways. It's the film that has the last laugh, I think, culturally. While I still rank it third of the 4, well, I keep having to remember there are 5 Rambo movies, so I still rank.
There are really only 4. Let's be honest.
Yeah. But as far as the 5 Rambo movies go, it's right in the middle. It's for me, it's 1, 4, 3, 2, 5. That's how I would rank it.
Same.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of my general take on the film. But let's start getting into the story of this movie. Let's look into the details. So first, we open in Thailand, and we have this stick fighting moment. Let me play a little clip here that Tony's kindly prepped for us. It's pretty intense. Like,
it's a great scene, and there's a lot of talk when you read about this scene. The director, Peter McDonald, was doing a handheld, and he was really close to the actors, and Stallone, of course, doing his own stunts, as he did throughout a lot of this movie. And allegedly, anyway, the director got hit by some of those sticks several times because he was just so close to them in a confined space. But you feel the impact. It's so close, and it's just really, you can, even when it shows the clips of Troutman and Skullhead going through the crowds, you can really feel just how packed and sweaty and hot and, everything that scene really is. And I think it's a really effective scene.
What do you think of it, Matt?
Yeah, it's a really great sort of intro action scene. I think it establishes, even though we're going to learn that Rambo is sort of living a more peaceful life, that he still is, he's still a badass. The problem for me is with the beginning part of this movie is, I watch Hot Shots Part 2 and MacGruber a lot, so they both kind of ruin the opening of this movie, because all I'm thinking of is Charlie Sheen with the ice cream, which I know is more a kickboxer reference,
right?
But no, and you're right that you feel how many people there are, and I'm sure they definitely had that many extras because this movie was that big. And yeah, I could easily believe if the director was handheld and that close, getting hit with those sticks.
It's a
solid action.
And also strange that you've got a guy who wants to be away from everybody, and so at first you're wondering, is Rambo, has he debased himself in some way? Is he doing this for his own largesse? And then you quickly find out, no, he's actually doing this to raise money for a monastery to help these monks. He's putting his skills to an altruistic purpose to help this community, this monastery.
When you look at the narrative of the film overall, you see this whole, this is where, and we'll talk about this in a second, where he does the whole, you've got to come full circle, John, and he's this war machine. He's this killer guy. And you can see in this, at the end of this fight, where he gets the guy on the ground and he's got this look in his eye like he's gonna just kill him, and he's you can see him pulling himself back from that edge to not do that. And it's he's tapping into that, and part of it, I think, is to help raise money for the monks, and I definitely believe that. But I also think he's working through some stuff, and he's got this caged animal inside of him, and so this is his outlet for that, I think. But he's struggling with sort of keeping it in check. And I think that's what Stallone is trying to convey, because of course, even though other people wrote this, Stallone had a heavy hand in a lot of this. And the idea is that even though, like, so initially Russell Mulcahy, who did the Highlander series, was the director of this film, and he went to Israel to start casting Russians, and 2 weeks ahead of Stallone gets there, and he's like, and he had all these like supermodel looking guys who were not intimidating looking enough. So Stallone fired Mulcahy and hired Peter McDonald. And a lot of people sort of claim that he was sort of a shadow director, and Stallone was really pulling a lot of the punches, pun intended.
So here is a clip from the film where this is right after the stick fight where Troutman and the
Skullhead
Red from that 70s
Red
show.
from that 70s show.
You're Red Foreman.
Yeah.
They show up at doesn't he also play Clarence Boddicker in RoboCop?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. They show up to try and convince Rambo to join them on this clandestine mission.
Right.
John Rambo.
I don't believe this.
So I know Tony and I were talking about this scene, and he said that this was sort of an anomaly for the character, because it's sort of, even though it's not laugh out loud funny, it's sort of giving you insight into the character's thoughts. Like, he doesn't have a lot of external dialogue. He's the 50-yard stare guy. Like, he doesn't talk a lot. And so having him say that was just kind of like very out of character and kind of funny. And so the question is, does that work? Like, does it feel like the character when he's externally saying, I don't believe this? Like,
I mean, we've been through 2 movies with him already, and yeah, he was kind of a haunted, hollow soul of a guy in the first 2 films. We saw a little bit of emotion with him and Co before she gets killed. But it was very I hesitate to use this phrase, but that's why the second film doesn't age very well, because it's become a cliche. Like, it's almost more what they based McBain on in The Simpsons than even Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, they used Arnold as the character, but the story beats that they always show McBain having are things like in Rambo 2 where Co gets killed, and he's like, no, all that kind of stuff. It's very so in this film you have a character who is more relaxed in his world. He's made his choice. He's walked off. He's doing something he believes in that's not violent. And, well, aside from the stick fighting, but he's not killing anybody. He's just winning some money. And yeah, I think it's okay. I mean, obviously they revert him back in Rambo 4, so they dial it back. But he's not like a total wisecracking rocket raccoon in this movie or anything.
He's not over the top, but I think, the director, Peter McDonald, has said that he was trying to give a little bit more comedy or a little bit more vulnerability to this character, and he was like, and it failed miserably. And so at least he feels that was the case. So I don't know, like, you can see it if you're really looking for it and you're watching, because I watched it earlier this morning, and just to reacquaint myself with it. It's been a while. And yeah, there are little moments that are sort of like, would Rambo really say that? I don't, or do that way? Like, it just doesn't really feel like him. So
what do you think, Matt?
Yeah, it's definitely a change from particularly the first movie, to where he has like little to no dialogue, to have him now having these little like sarcastic comments to himself, not even to other people. I kind of took it as maybe it's just he's been with the monks, so he's more relaxed than he was before. He gets his sort of anger outlet with the stick fighting. Especially when you go to 4 and they kind of just forget about this. It's interesting to watch. It's not my favorite depiction of John Rambo. I don't think it's horrible. It's just, it's a weird, like, I don't know. It's weird because it's like, there are many moments in this movie to where he does feel like who he was in the first two, and then there are moments to where it feels more like Stallone, who he is, sort of took over.
Yeah.
It actually at some points it feels more like Rocky than Rambo. You know, like Rocky would have those little talking to himself and comments. So maybe they were just like, "Hey, Stallone, Rocky 4 worked out really well for you. Maybe we should do that here."
I mean, possibly. It does. Again, I still think the movie is enjoyable. Like, certainly if you're looking for a great action movie, it's great. But these little things are very uncharacteristic. And like you said, when they go to the fourth film, he's back to his normal self. So
yeah. So Troutman tries to have a conversation with John about John Rambo. His first name's John, for those of you that don't know, about you know, when are you going to come full circle? When are you going to realize that you are a trained combat creature? You are that. This is what you're good at. This is what you do best. You can't run from it. You've got to lean into it. You've got to accept it. And you know, John's like, no, my life is here, and I'm not going to be doing that, and I don't want to go on this mission. My war is over. I have a little bit of it here.
What do you think I am?
A full-blooded combat soldier.
Not anymore. I don't want it.
That's too bad, because you're stuck with it.
And he says no, and then Troutman has to go out and say, he said no. And then Red Foreman is like, oh, well.
I thought you said he was this great, like, soldier.
Yeah. And then we're gonna send you on the mission, Troutman, anyway. Sorry you won't have John with you, but
it's kind of a big problem, but we'll just go right past that.
And you would think that they would find somebody else for him to go with.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
I
like
mean,
maybe
is Troutman like
maybe that guy from the second movie that was like Cobra Kai guy.
Yeah, I can't see Troutman being like, it's Rambo or no one.
Yeah,
you know, like
it's a weird choice.
But yeah, so they send Troutman out, and unfortunately, shortly into his mission, this occurs.
Drop the weapons! You have no chance of escape! Drop your weapons! Now!
Sorry.
What do you...
I mean, he instantly trips and breaks his ankle and gets his book stomped by the bully. I mean, it's just instantly. Like, I mean, it almost feels like they filmed that on a soundstage. I don't know if they really did, but it just feels very like, and really quickly, this is what happens when you don't have Rambo with you, and scene. Like, it's really, I don't know. It just made me kind of laugh when I watched it earlier.
God didn't make Rambo. I made him. I can't replicate what he does. I'm no good at it, but I made him. Like,
it's funny because, like, in this movie, in that scene you played earlier, he talks about the whole, the sculptor making, like, he gets this big piece of stone and he carves away all these pieces, and everyone's like, oh, the sculpture you made is so beautiful. And he's like, I didn't make it. I just, you know, the sculpture was always there. The statue was always there. I just chipped away the little pieces, and, you know, we didn't make you. We just honed you. And it's like, you know, but what that's saying is that Rambo is this unmoving, unchanging piece of stone that's always the same thing. He's not capable of growth or change or any of these things. He's just this lump of stone. And, you know, Troutman himself and the military are the ones with agency and the ability to make decisions. And he's just a tool. Or in this case, he's the outcome of a tool being used. And I think that's a really weird, interesting way of seeing how Troutman is approaching him, certainly by the point we're at here in this movie.
Yeah. Carl Rudy, thank you for the super chat. He says, for my lifelong love of everything Stallone.
Amen to that.
And then Master Son 42, thank you for the super chat. He says, a colonel would never go on a mission like this. No. He is like 50 years old trying to go fight. War is a young man's game. Just ask my back and knees.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I can't imagine. I mean, obviously he's kind of in shape, and I mean, they do a decent job of showing his resistance to interrogation and stuff like that. But
which we have a clip from.
You started this damn war. Now you have to deal with it.
And we will. It is just a matter of time before we achieve a complete victory.
You know, there won't be a victory.
We already had our Vietnam. Now you're gonna have yours.
So, you wish to test me? Good.
This is the area where if you ignore the way they've directed the villain to act, then Rambo 3 is a very prophetic movie because it's looking at history like Stallone likes to do, and it's saying, hey, Afghanistan is a place that's never been defeated. So if you try this, it's bad. Like you shouldn't do this. And then of course we all know what happened 20 years later. We tried it. Yeah. So Rambo 3, I think, has a lot of street cred through the lens of history. Now let's talk about, well, no, you know what? Before we move over to the villain, I've made this statement. Do you both agree or disagree with that Rambo 3 has a little bit of a Nostradamus thing going on here?
I think yes and no. I mean, I'm certainly not like an expert on Middle East policy and history and all that stuff, but I mean, I know that the group and I swear, like right here it says Mujahideen, but elsewhere I've seen it Mujahideen, so I apologize. I'm not sure which one is correct, but that group of guerrilla fighters there in Afghanistan do later have some ties. I don't know if they exactly become the Taliban, but they're tied to the Taliban. And so if you just look at it from like the whole, oh, well, the U.S. is like going, but the U.S. did go in and assist those people and sort of build all of that up. But yes, just on what you're saying, 100%, like, I don't know why we didn't sort of heed that idea of like, it's really difficult to, it's kind of like the Russians themselves. Like, it's not super easy to win a big, land war against Russians, like for the same reason. It's just, I mean.
What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it has like a Nostradamus effect. I'd say it's more like Simpsons, to where it's just like, wow, it's really weird how much they predicted, isn't it? We probably should have paid more attention at the time.
Right.
And yeah, Troutman's sort of line about how, oh, we were already had our Vietnam and now we know, well, I guess we've had two. So those who do not learn from their history are doomed to repeat it, I suppose.
Yep. And those who did not carefully watch Rambo 3 are definitely doomed to repeat it. See, if you watch a movie like this carefully enough, you will come away with some nuggets of wisdom. Now let's foil that with the way they directed the portrayal of the villain. Matt, I'll let you kick this off. Thoughts on the villain in this movie?
He's so dumb. And it's so funny because this is 88, you said, right?
Uh-huh.
So then 2 years later, we get Hunt for October, which just is a far superior and more realistic portrayal of Russians, military leaders and everything. This is the stereotypical, I am the evil Russian. Look at me. Americans, I hate you so much. John Rambo, we kill you. It's like an SNL skit of a Russian, and it takes me out of the movie. And Stallone's really good in it, but it's one of those things where whenever you cut back to your villain, he's so dumb and so over the top that I just can't help but laugh, and I'm not supposed to. I'm supposed to be intimidated by this guy, but I'm not.
Yeah, it takes me. That's the reason that I told the story about the casting by Russell Mulcahy of those supermodel pretty boys that Stallone didn't think were tough enough, and I'm like, and this guy is the guy that's tough enough that you approved. Like, I wanted to look it up, but I ran out of time. Like, the actor who is playing this role, I'm not sure what else he's done. I definitely know he is not Russian. Like, his accent he's probably British, maybe. A lot of times they cast British people for Russians here. I don't know why. But one thing that I noticed in my rewatch this morning was with the villain, like the very first time you see him and he's interrogating Troutman, there's like this scene where they cut like from Troutman to the villain, and behind the villain is this mirror, and on the mirror there are these photos of his family, like with a lady with the babushka on her head and the children, and they're like, it's like a a bedroom dresser mirror back there. It's like, is this his little bedroom or his desk? And he's got like a little picture of his wife and kids. And I just wonder like what the idea was behind sort of humanizing the villain in that way, because that was definitely, whether you noticed it or not, it was a choice that some set designer or somebody on the film made to sort of humanize this villain by showing that he has a family. And it's like, that's a weird choice for such a kind of like over the top villain. It's just very jarring. But yes, I agree. The way that he's being directed, it's a weird choice.
Yeah, it's very over the top. It's
pun intended, right?
I mean, I wish the actor would have looked at the director and just said, "Meet me halfway."
Yeah.
Across the sky.
That's right.
Out where the world belongs to only you and I.
That's right.
Yeah. So Rambo finds out from Red Foreman that Colonel Troutman has been captured.
Which I thought was just really kind of him to walk all the way back to that place just to tell Rambo. He's like, I don't expect you to do anything. We can't do anything about it. I just thought you should know. Bye. Like, I mean, maybe send him a letter. Like he was complaining before about walking all the way up those steps to get to the... It was just a weird insert scene. Like we have to figure out a way for John Rambo to find out.
Right.
It's very weird.
It was a guilt trip. He's like, hey, I just want you to know that your buddy is captured. And I know you didn't want to do anything about it in the beginning, but if you want to do something about it now, we can't officially be involved. So hope you can sleep at night. I'm going to go home now.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Yeah.
It's like
so he goes
guilt tripping his kid.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly,
weird.
Matt. Exactly. So they
I'm so disappointed in you.
Rambo travels to Afghanistan, of course, to figure out how to get Troutman out, and he's given the names of a few contacts from the Red Foreman that he can reach out to. So here's a little bit here.
This is Afghanistan. But Afghan people fight hard. They never be defeated.
I think this was Peter McDonald's attempt to have his Lawrence of Arabia moment. In the beginning of Lawrence of Arabia, Lawrence is sent on a mission out to find Prince Faisal in the Sahara Desert in Arabia, and he is sent with a Bedouin guide named Kazim, Tafas, and Tafas and him start to get to know one another. Tafas has never really been around non-Middle Eastern people before, especially from Europe, and they're starting to get to know one another. And there's this moment where there's this grand desert vista, not an Afghani cliff vista, but the same idea. Instead of being on horses, they're on camels, and they stop and they have these conversations about Tafas's culture. And so it's like Lawrence saying to him, he says at one point they're looking down and his eyesight is so good he can see another tribe on the horizon, and he says something about what tribe they are, and then Lawrence looks at him and he says, yes, I know you're not that tribe. You are something of the Beni Salim. I don't remember the exact words. And he's like, yes, and so they start to have this bonding thing. It's mirrored in this movie, where they're trying to do the same thing to build this idea that Rambo is a guy who respects other cultures, and he's not there to judge them. He's just there to help them and also get Troutman out.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've read that the original ending of this movie had Rambo staying with the freedom fighters. And you can feel that being set up here. So starting around this point in the film, he's gaining cred with this group. Like, because initially when they have the meeting with everyone sort of sitting around and talking, they all kind of think he's crazy and they don't necessarily think he knows what he's doing. But then as we get to like the upcoming scenes, he really bonds with them and they kind of accept him in a Dances with Wolves kind of a way into the tribe, into the group, and he sort of becomes one of them. And there's a lot, and I can't remember if we have some clips of some of that stuff where I think we do have a couple more clips, but you really do feel like they are expecting him, the guy Masood, I think is his name, who is actually based on a real person in real life, whose name is the same. He's like, you know, if you're here to help our people, then we will certainly help you. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, he's not here to help your people. He's here to get his guy out.
Mm-hmm.
But in the original scope of the film, he would have then, if he had joined with them, then he would have been there to help their people. And then all of it kind of makes a lot more sense. The way it's currently structured, it makes him seem a little bit like, I'm here to help myself and my friends, and you guys, good luck.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but
Wicked Person says, my experience of American soldiers is they're trained to know who in the world the army is watching, worried about, parentheses, lots of people. Thank you for the super chat, Wicked Person. Matt, what do you think of how they structure the relationship between John Rambo and the Afghanis?
Now that I know the original ending, it makes more sense, because it is weird how it is structured now, which is like, he clearly establishes that he's just there to get his friend and to get out, basically. So it's weird that they become so accepting of him, particularly the relationship he'll have with the younger sort of freedom fighter. But now, yeah, it's one of those weird things to where, like, all this is from, you know, this is all set up for a payoff that we don't get anymore. So now the setup is just kind of odd.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, it would have been a great payoff for his character as well, because it's sort of like he's trying to find a way to use his skills as this warrior that he's been made into, whether he had a choice in that or not, in a way that he can feel good about. Like, where he can feel like he's making a positive difference, because clearly that's what he's trying to do in Thailand, right? Like, he's trying to help somebody, and he feels this need because he felt like he was used not in a positive way in Vietnam. And so I think he's trying to find that place where he can be. And this would be a great role for someone like that, to be kind of a freedom fighter. He's got the skills. He's making a difference for people, you know. And he's kind of got more autonomy and agency as a guerrilla fighter as opposed to just being a soldier.
Yep.
But they don't really give him that payoff. Instead, they go for he's going to go back home to America and face that whole thing, which then ends up not paying off once you see the fourth movie, because he's over in Burma, you know.
Right.
So
then he's introduced to the leadership of the Mujahideen, which this was a big topic in cinema at the time. I mean, because the Russians were invading Afghanistan at that time. So it's played up the year before in The Living Daylights, the Bond film with Timothy Dalton, where he also finds himself in Afghanistan trying to assist and be assisted by the Mujahideen, which the international community was hoping would become an ally in the future. So we have this clip here from his introduction to the Mujahideen.
More gifts from the Soviets. They look like toys, but they are mines. We teach the children not to touch. Some learn too late.
And I think it's very poignant that that Tony has put this clip in here, because we just saw in War Stories just prior to Iconicon from Kajaki, the whole idea that those Russian mines, of which they laid millions and millions of them, were still a problem 20 years later or I guess 15 years later ish, during the war in Afghanistan with the British and the Americans.
Right.
So,
which we see more of the mines later in this film, where he's sort of crawling through and then using this giant knife to sort of lift the landmines and sort of evade. Like, I thought that was not a nice touch that they kind of showed. Like, they didn't just drop that thread; they kept it going.
Right. The thing that I have noticed in watching this film when he meets the Mujahideen is that this is where he learns of their struggle and their cause. And it starts to make him realize that he's now involved in something a lot bigger than just getting Troutman out.
Yes.
You know, they're killing the women and children. The leadership, the wise people, they if I recall, they kind of resist him at first. They're like, we don't really want to help you. Like,
they do. Like, so there's this big scene where there's like all the men gathered in a big circle, and his guide person sort of, you know, is helping explain what he wants. And they're asking him, what are you wanting to do? And they're like, we don't want to send a bunch of men in there. They'll all get they'll get killed and the Russians will come back and kill all of us if we do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I don't need a bunch of men. I only need like 4 people. And they're like, well, you can't succeed. We're not doing it. And he was like, well, then I'll just go alone. And they're like, you'll die. He's like, okay, then I'll die. And that him saying that makes them kind of be impressed by his, fortitude.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of starts to win them over. And then right after that is the next clip, which is, I believe, the sport, which I don't remember if they say the name of the sport, but
it involves the carcass of a sheep, and they all it's
like football.
Yeah,
it's like football. Yeah.
Yeah. So
and
here's
Stallone gets to show off his great horsemanship, which is he's so good at it.
And fun fact, the horse he's riding is the same horse from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade that Harrison Ford rides.
That's right.
So same horse, because they filmed in the same area of Israel.
Yep.
That is a very puffy sheep carcass there.
It's a lovely little puppet. It makes me happy that it's not a real sheep
but
carcass.
it does look like a F.A.O. Schwartz teddy bear. It's
it's very cute.
Gotta get this teddy bear so I can win these points.
Can we just take a moment, though, to appreciate Stallone's form on the back of that horse, like in all aspects, whether he's just regular riding, like he's just, and then when he does that stunt, like.
What's interesting, too, is, we just talked about Last Crusade as the connection with this horse. The stunt performer in Last Crusade makes that exact same move on that horse to pick up a rock off the ground to then shove into the tank barrel. So it's weird that it's almost like there was something going on in films back then where anytime there was a horse, you had to have the stuntman lean off the saddle and grab something off the ground. Like that was a thing.
Well, I would think that a horse, when it's doing, you're using a horse in that way, they kind of have to be trained to deal with somebody doing that, like, because the horse, if I would think that they'd want to rehearse that. So maybe that horse is just really good at that stunt, and they were like, well, we've already got this horse that knows how to do this thing, and if you can do the thing, then it's like a match made in heaven.
Of course.
Exactly.
All right,
I'm guessing. I don't know, but
at this point, there's this big action sequence that happens because the Russians then attack the village. Now, prior to this, as he entered the village, he met a little boy. And the little boy is asking him all about, what's that on your neck? And it's Ko's necklace of jade that she gave him in the previous movie before she died. And he's like, can I have it? He's like, no. And then he's like, what's this? And he points to his knife, and he's like, it's a knife, and he's like, can I have it? He's like, no. So the kid is like, he's trying to survive. He's just, he's this Afghani kid, and he lives in a war zone. So he's got, do we want to, what you've got thoughts? I see the hamster running in the wheel. What are you thinking?
Well, first off, I'm thinking that, again, the behind the scenes stuff is that apparently Stallone was not a big fan of this kid and wanted to kill him off in the movie because he just hated working with him.
Really?
Yeah.
God.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really annoying to him. But yeah, I generally think kids are annoying. There's a little bit of, I feel kind of bad for the kid. Like, I don't find him as annoying as Stallone did, but I mean, I could like he's kind of a load. You know what I mean? Like, as you go on in the movie, he's like that annoying kid. He's like Anakin in like episode 1, where it's like, you're causing problems for everyone else because we have to go and rescue you. Like, he's like Scott in Mask.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what? You're going to go off, get yourself captured. Now we're going to have to risk our lives to save you, which he kind of gets injured in the break-in later in the film, and they're having to carry him out. And it's just like, he's a load. But the problem is you've also got Troutman, who is also kind of a load. And so it's like, you only need one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just my take on it. But what do you think, Matt?
It felt like somebody who's writing this movie watched Road Warrior and was like, we really like the relationship between the feral kid and Max. Let's do that. Except the feral kid didn't talk at all. And he had the cool boomerang, and he wasn't annoying.
Right.
But let's make ours annoying.
Did you find him annoying?
I mean, So when he was asking all the questions, like, what's this, what's that, like, it was the stuff you were talking about, to where it's just like he exists later on to just be this thing that they have to take care of, that they have to get out of there. And it's just like, by that point in the movie, you already have the Russians coming after them. You have them trying to save Troutman and the flamethrowers and the helicopters. It's just this additional piece that is not really needed. And there's really no payoff for his character at all.
Well, I think that, yes, I agree with you. I think that if the original ending had been followed, it would have made more sense, because then it shows that Rambo's willing to risk himself for those people specifically and not just his guy. But as the movie is now, I mean, yeah, it's all well and fine for him to save a kid, but it's just sort of like he could have just saved the guy, like his guide that went with him. Like, it doesn't have to be a kid, but I think there's something about the helplessness of a child. They've already done that with Ko as a woman in the second movie, so now they're going to pick the other vulnerable group as having a little kid. Oh, we got to save a little kid now.
Master Son 42, thank you for the super chat. He says, back to the mine thing. Remember, bringing attention to mines was something Princess Diana was doing right before she died around the same time. Very true.
It's very true. That's a good point.
Good call out. Okay, so then we have this attack on the village by the Russians, and this is right as the sheep game has either ended or
it's right as the end of it. Yeah.
Right. And Rambo decides to do his Rambo thing and help the village. So we have this moment right here. Of course, he blows up the helicopter. Probably says, blows up the helicopter and then runs. Yeah, he's a formidable opponent. The villagers see this. They kind of have a little bit of a change of heart, if I recall. Is that right? Maybe they don't really help him so much, but they see that he's like a brave guy or something.
Well, they had
like
already
that.
said they were going to help him. I think it's just that he wins their hearts a little bit by both the game and then him putting himself on the line to protect the people. And so he's showing his mettle, and they're like, okay, you can be one of us. You're on our side. We like you now. Right.
All right. So then he goes to infiltrate the base.
Yeah,
now,
this is the part where he's doing the thing with this giant knife.
With the knife. Now, do we want to talk about the knife before we move on? Because I know you did. That's why you put him on the table. So we got to talk about this knife.
I just got to. Okay, so this is the knife from Rambo 2, which is bigger than the knife from Rambo 1. Now these knives from the first two films were made by Jimmy Lyle, and this one is certainly bigger. It's got the blacking on it and stuff like that. But this is essentially the same, just slightly bigger than the first film. It's got the cord around it.
It's markedly bigger than the first film.
It's bigger, but the design is the same, because you've got like the little piece that screws off in here that's got the compass inside, and they've got the string around here. Whereas this thing, which I'm not even going to try to pick it up,
I'll pick it up if you want.
Yeah, it's designed by Gil Hibben, and if you just kind of look at the size, like it's doing the supersize thing, which is around the same time that McDonald's was supersizing their fries and stuff. We're getting a supersized knife. Even the handle is bigger. Everything about it is bigger.
Guess you could say John was compensated for something.
I mean, it's funny because Jimmy Lyle, like, he kept going to Jimmy Lyle saying, "I need it bigger. I need it bigger. I want it to look like this." And he was like, "I'm not making a knife like that. It's ridiculous. If you want that, you should just go to Gil Hibben." And Stallone was like, "Okay." And so he did. Like, that's the short story of what happened. But in the movie, because Stallone is like at his peak bigness, like he's really big and ropey in this movie. Matt Swafford earlier said he looks like a bunch of walnuts in a sock. But yeah, he's very big. He's got the tiny waist and the really big, muscly arms and stuff like that. And so when
his hair is big.
I mean, everything is bigger. And so when he's holding it, it doesn't look insanely big. So I think it's scaled to how big he was. But at the same time, like, when you see it, it's like, good Lord, that's not convenient to carry around on your hip. Like it's going to be clunking around. Like,
yeah, it's also not good for stealth combat. You know,
No.
like it's too big to throw. You know,
it's just, I think it's just something that visually, you know, Stallone wanted it to have like on film. Things that work on camera in real life aren't necessarily usable.
Yeah,
So I'm
but he
just
was
telling
also
you,
competing with Arnold.
He definitely was.
So
So he
every
was
movie-
compensating.
What's
It
that,
looks
Matt?
very much like the Predator knife. I was
Yeah.
thinking that watching it this time, it was like, it looks almost the same.
Well,
And the-
wasn't the Predator knife a Hibben knife as well?
I don't
know.
remember.
I don't know
I just know
anything
that the
about it.
Predator knife was coming off of trying to compete with Rambo 2. So then he goes and does Rambo 3 and he's like, watch this, hold my beer. And then he like has this massive knife, you know.
Well, even the fourth one's like kind of the same size as this. It's like a little machete.
I think the fourth one's a little more restrained though. It's not
more
as,
restrained, and it's
the
because
fourth
it's-
one is basically like a piece of rebar that's just like sharpened and
Yeah.
flattened. And
I like the fourth one more. This is my least favorite knife of all of the knives from these films. So yeah, I will say that. I do have it, but I don't. So this is not an official like Rambo stamped one. This is actually made by a guy who studied under Jimmy Lyle.
Yeah.
So this was sort of a custom made knife, whereas this is just sort of the standard. You know, you can see it came in the box. It's not my favorite.
Right. All right. So we infiltrate the Russian base, and he uses this knife in the minefield outside the Russian compound. It is a approximation with far too much speed of how an actual mine-sweeping thing would happen. He would have blown himself up doing it at the speed that he was doing it. But the principle is correct, where it's, you know, you're using your knife at an angle.
Right.
He's going in there like he's just, you know, chopping cabbage.
Yeah.
But you know, and then they get into the base and he finds Troutman, but he can't get him out initially. He has to escape and he gets wounded. So there is this infiltration of the base. So he gets in the base, finds Troutman, can't get him out.
Kind
Because
of reminds me of that scene from Under Siege 2, Dark Territory, where Seagal is like under the train and he's.
See, I was just thinking that talking about how he wanted to show up one on Arnold with the knife. I feel like he was like, so Harrison hung off the back of a truck and Raiders watching hang off a tank.
I think if I get under a tank, you know, it'd be like more impressive than like the truck and that movie.
And I agree.
With the dude with the whip and the hat, you know?
It is more impressive.
Anyway. Anyway. So Matt, we're just gonna keep doing this the rest of the show. Okay. You and I just all right. So
this may be the most irreverent war stories.
Maybe
because we don't have Tony here like giving us the real facts of what it's like to be in real warfare. So we're all just like, okay.
Yeah. But this is where we are nonetheless, right?
That is where we are. Yes.
Then Rambo is wounded getting out of to escape. He has to escape and then figure out what he's gonna do. I feel like he does get Troutman out, doesn't he?
He doesn't then.
Oh, he doesn't then. That's what I thought.
He comes back later.
Yeah, comes back later. Then
he gets out because see the kid and the guide guy are with him in this underground. It's actually the sewers of this like fort or whatever, and they're kind of going through the water. And it's very reminiscent of the first film when he goes into the cave.
Right. And
he has the glow stick, which is a payoff from earlier in the film where he gets the glow stick and the guy's like, "What does this do?" He's like, "It turns blue." So he's holding it up much like he held up the matches in the first movie, and he's walking through this cave-like structure with water dripping, and he's kind of going like this, and it's like mirroring, it's like poetry, it rhymes. And so, but he's got to get the kid out of harm's way. So this is what I was talking about, where the kid's kind of a load. So he pushes out the metal bars out of like this hole in the wall where there's like a window with bars on it. He pushes it out with his big muscles, and they get the kid out and escape. And then he kind of keeps fighting and goes back in, and that's when he gets Troutman. They're like, in the meantime, the bad guys, the big bad guy is like, who is this guy? You know, why does he want you so badly? And, you know, blah, blah, blah. What do you think? He's God? And he was like, no, God would have mercy. He won't. It's like so testosterone.
Yeah, because they've been torturing him,
Yeah,
trying to get more information out of him
about
the
where
time.
these missiles are.
Yeah, about where the missiles are. Yeah. Someone's asking if we can get a Rambo quote by way of Jimmy Stewart. I'm trying to think of a quote that's long enough.
They drew first blood, not me.
Well, I mean, there are lots of quotes from like the first movie.
Yeah.
This movie, yeah.
Well, I just wanted something to eat.
Yeah.
But wouldn't have been anything if it weren't for that king shit cop. Yeah.
I mean, I think he said, are we going to win this time in the second one? But it seems like he says something really similar in this movie as well. Like,
you know, I can't. Rambo's lines are very economical. You know, there's not a lot of. He has monologues at the end, you know, of these films.
Yeah. And
then they cut to those like Trey Parker, Matt Stone songs. We give our hearts, we give it all.
Sometimes they are Frank Stallone songs.
Yes.
Sometimes they're not. But either way, they all sound like Frank Stallone songs.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, all right. He gets out. He's wounded. And then he has to do the thing Rambo always does.
Yes.
He has to patch himself up. Well, I mean, MacGyver was really popular back then. So
it's true.
I mean, I'm not even making a joke. So they're looking for a way for him to have to figure out use what he has to cauterize this wound.
I remember when this came out thinking that looked pretty badass.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now it's kind of funny, but I mean, it's a good stunt. Like I think the way that they designed it to look, it looks pretty good. And I don't know if the physics of it are accurate, but you know, nonetheless, it looks pretty cool. And he's badass. What do you think, Matt? Is it cheesy? Not cheesy?
I mean, of course it's cheesy. It's Rambo 3. There's my review. Again, we're talking about the knife, the muscles, the hair. It just, again, it feels like this is what we did in the past, you know, because he patches himself up in the first movie, but let's make it bigger. In the first movie, he was just sewing himself up. Now there's fire. Man, I don't know if this is possible to do. I would suggest don't attempt this case at all. But Michael, you bring up MacGyver, and that actually, again, Arnold with the knife and you know, Ford with the tank. This feels like, so Richard Dean thinks he's better than me. Just watch this. This entire movie was just Stallone he was feeling a little less manly, I guess, around this time. So he made an entire movie to where he just showed up everyone else, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, he did say that 2 and 3 were vanity projects. He said that he feels like looking back that they were vanity. But at the same time, this isn't out of the realm of any movie studio's habits. Even now, they look at things that are popular now and they go, we need that times 100. So I can see, you know, Stallone and the movie producers going, well, I mean, you know, MacGyver is really popular and we should have some of that in our movie. And then the producers are like, oh, good idea, Sly, good idea. But we can do it on like a budget, you know, like we can give it like $5 million, MacGyver, whereas, you know, he's like $500,000. Like
I think too that this is the third installment in a franchise, and you know, usually like we will be talking more about sequels tomorrow on our Highlander stream, or it's not a stream, but our premiere. But sequels, you know, there's like formulas of what people put into sequels. And while Stallone is probably one of the few people who's done pretty good sequels, like both with this franchise and with the Rocky franchise, I think that, you know, you do kind of have to always top yourself, and it becomes harder with every installment. And so in this one, I think he was just like, let's just make everything bigger. the action bigger,
Mhm.
the knife bigger, the muscles, the hair, all of it. And so that was the technique that was used in this movie. Otherwise, it's a lot of the beats of the movie are very similar to previous Rambos, and certainly 4 copies a lot from this in terms of like the concept of what happens in it.
Right. Now, unfortunately, at this point, I don't have any more clips to show, but we can talk our way through the rest of this, the rest of the action.
Mhm.
The next part, the next major part is Rambo being hunted in the huge caves, the caverns, which is actually, it's a really cool location to have these action scenes. He's, you know, he has to fight the big guy, which is a trope from Indiana Jones as well. There's always a big guy.
And that big guy was big. Like,
Yeah.
He looked like he looked like Magnus Magnuson back from like the 90s or the aughts, I guess. Like when he was like the strongman competitions where he would like pull a whole monster truck or a semi, you know, in those like world's strongest man competitions. That dude was big. He turns over an entire vehicle in one scene. Like,
yep. But he has to fight this big dude. Matt, as somebody who has seen a lot of action films, what do you think of the cave fight where they're kind of suspended on their rappelling ropes and they're not wanting to take a huge fall, but they're fighting? And what did you think of it?
I mean, I liked it. It is a very classic trope to where it's like there's always like the main head guy, and then there's always this sort of like big guy that you got to fight. I mean, this is like, this is Goldfinger and on job from the Bond movies.
Right.
I liked it. I mean, the fact that the guy, at least, even though we all know Stallone's going to win the fight, he at least looked like he could put up a fight. It's not like Martin Cove in the second movie to where you're like, if they fought, Stallone would have kicked your ass. Like here, it was pretty exciting. I was enjoying it. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he pulls out the knife as well in this scene, and he starts using that. And the whole thing of them not wanting to sort of fall into the caves and Troutman not being able to help. It was pretty exciting. It's nowhere near as good as the plane fight in Raiders, but it's solid enough.
Isn't this where it ends with him like pushing him back down into the hole on the rope and he's got like grenades or something attached to him or a mine and he blows up on the rope? Am I thinking of the right movie?
I ran out of time, so I haven't seen the very end of this movie anytime recently. So
I think you are right. I think he does sort of like pull the pin and sort of kick him down the hole. But if I'm not mistaken, this is like Die Hard 2, to where like grenades blow up a lot faster than this guy's. I feel like Rambo would have died as well. I watched this movie last week.
Heroes always are able to survive nearby explosions by just diving behind some cardboard boxes. Whereas the rest of us would all be killed just from the pressure impact, and then Grindhead Jim says it dropped it right down his shorts. Yes. Spin kick, he falls and explodes from the pin from the grenades. 5 seconds is a grenade. And then King Eric says, and they call it a mine. At this point in the film, I think right before this fight is my favorite exchange in the whole movie.
Yeah.
And it's the part where him and Troutman, he's gone back, he's gotten Troutman, he's gotten him out. They're being chased. They're standing there. He's got his cauterized wound on one side. He's standing there heaving in his breath and his abs are, whatever. Troutman's standing there. And it's something, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's something to the effect of, he's like, does it hurt? And he's like, remember all that training you gave us to like ignore pain? And he's like, yeah, is it working? And he's like, not really. Like, and that's my
another
favorite
one of those comedy lines that it's sort of like,
but I think it actually works because it's in context. Like Rambo.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine, but I just don't know if it's really him. Like,
sure,
but it's funny.
You are. I mean, yes. That's why I kind of like it, because it's funny, but it's not like him being like, "Hey."
No, I mean it's funny within like a somewhat believable version that
It's not like he's standing there at the top of the cliff and he's like, "Hey, Colonel, knock knock, who's there?" Like it's not anything like that.
No, I get that, but it's a little weird. It's a little weird.
And then we have what is probably the most criticized sequence in the entire film, which is the final battle. So at this point, the
Which
Russian...
they couldn't film in Israel because of filming restrictions, so they went back to Arizona and filmed there.
They couldn't film this in Israel?
No, they filmed all the other stuff in Israel aside from the parts in Thailand. But yeah, they had to come back to the States to film this last because of, I guess, the aircraft and all of the stuff they wanted to use. They just couldn't get permission to do all of that there.
Oh,
yeah.
But they could get permission to do the village attack.
Yeah, well, they built that set, and yeah,
Uh-huh.
I think it must have been like fly zones, or I don't know. I didn't get the details of it, but that is what happened. And then, can we really also, we have to talk about this aircraft. It's like a modded out. It's not an aircraft that actually exists, right? It's like,
it's supposed to look like a Russian attack helicopter, but because we couldn't get Russian equipment,
yeah,
you have to modify something else. And
Yeah.
it's the same one that was used in Rambo 2.
right.
They just brought it back for Rambo 3.
Yeah.
Those movies back then were obsessed with that Russian attack helicopter. They used it anytime they could.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Matt, of this final battle? Is it as bad as people say in your mind, as somebody who's come at this movie very objectively? Like,
so I watch a lot of action movies, as Michael said, and there are some really, really great ones to where your heart's racing the whole way through, and then there are just some dumb fun ones. In the realm of dumb fun, I had a lot of dumb fun with this end climax. Nowhere near as good as some of Stallone's other outings, but I had fun, and also this reminds me of the Sega Genesis game, which is probably the only decent Rambo game that exists, to where you are fighting the helicopter with the arrows and everything. So I had fun with it, but objectively, yeah, it's really stupid. And I feel like Troutman and Rambo would have never survived as long as they did.
yeah, they brought back the arrows from part 2, and they felt like they had to use them in part 3 because they were such an iconic part of the second film. I understand them more in part 4 than I do in part 3.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's something about the jungle warfare that makes it more palatable, I guess. Silent weapons and all that, you know. But the tank versus, so this is going to become a trope in the next Rambo film, Rambo 4, where they think they're surrounded by the entire Russian army, and then the Mujahideen show up and start helping them rout the Russians. And at that point, Rambo hops in a tank and charges the helicopter, which I have to ask myself, why didn't the helicopter just stay higher up in the air? Why did it decide to fly low enough for Rambo to play chicken with it and ram it with a tank?
I don't know. You have to ignore physics to understand and logic. Like, it's sort of like, though, when you have something where someone's running from like a boulder or something that's rolling in a straight line, and they don't just turn right.
Mm-hmm.
They just run straight and then they get killed. You're like, just turn right. You can just
Prometheus.
But yeah, it's weird. It's a weird choice, and I think it's not. But I agree, it's fun. Like, it's explosions and
I don't hate the ending, but the tank versus the helicopter, the way they staged it. In the second film at the end, or the end of the action sequence, it's very unlikely that a combat helicopter like that would not immediately just tear up a Huey. Like, I get that's or whatever he was flying. I guess it had a few weapons on it, but it wasn't a standard Huey. But it wasn't, you know what I'm saying? Like, but it was still a little bit more like for like. Whereas in this case, I think it really jumps the believability barrier into, the tank might be able to repel the weaponry of the helicopter, but the helicopter wouldn't sacrifice itself by getting that low either. And the tank would have a hard time hitting that helicopter in flight as well. So it's very, based on the 2 Rambo films we've seen prior to this, I think it becomes a very implausible ending.
I feel like this, I can't remember which Die Hard it is. It's either 3 or 4 where Bruce Willis is going through, I think he's going through a tunnel on some sort of like motorcycle or something, and then he flies through the air and like shoots somebody that's in a helicopter. It's an insane sequence, and it's the only thing I remember from the movie. And this is kind of on par with that, where you're just like, wow, like it does pull you out of the movie. It's a little much, but I mean, it's at the height of 80s being big, like, and I know that like a tank, like I mentioned earlier, can only go 20 miles an hour. He had the engine completely replaced in it so that it could, like, it was a giant truck engine or something that made it go 50 miles an hour. Because again, otherwise it just looks like it's going, and this helicopter is like very agile and it's got, movability in like 3D, as opposed to just in a straight line on the ground. Yeah, it's problematic.
All right. Well, so we're at the closing of the film, and Troutman is saved. The Mujahideen have gotten rid of the Russian compound, I guess, temporarily anyway. Rambo and Troutman are driving off in a Jeep. There's no indication at this point that Rambo is going to run off to Laos and become a snake handler,
right?
Which is what ends up happening.
Well, he does a pit stop in Arizona first, right? Like he goes.
No, that's the end of 4.
That's the end of 4. Sorry,
that's
I'm
what
getting
I'm saying.
Mixed up.
So,
okay, you're right.
So what do you both think about the ending of Rambo 3?
Matt?
Well, now knowing what the original ending was, this feels very tacked on to where they're like, yeah, but Rambo's our hero, so he needs to want to go back to America. That's what this has all been building to. Rambo going back to America. It feels very tacked on, and the more we've gone on with this war stories, I'm feeling like Rambo 4 was essentially just a remake of Rambo 3.
That's how I feel as well, yeah.
And so I feel like this ending is really just that very like 80s, America F. Yeah, of course Rambo will want to come back. Why wouldn't he? He don't want to go back to building monasteries or anything. He wants to come back to McDonald's and Mickey Mouse. It feels very dumb. And
and it worked out so well for him the last time he came back to America as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
what was the original ending that was replaced?
He's decided to stay with the Mujahideen and fight with them.
Really? Was that filmed?
No, I think it was just in like the original script.
Oh, because there's that fake ending crawl that people thought was real.
Yeah, well, there's that which I was
photoshopped.
going to get to, which the film. There's sort of this urban legend that the original version of the film had like this film is dedicated to the brave Mujahideen warriors, but it actually has been pretty thoroughly debunked, and it always said that this film is dedicated to the brave people of Afghanistan or something like that. It doesn't mention Mujahideen specifically, but that the claim, the conspiracy theory is that it was changed after September 11th because America is trying to erase the fact that we supported that group of people. So again, that's tied into what you were asking earlier about being prophetic and all of that kind of stuff. But I mean, the ending, like we've talked about, there's a lot of stuff that's set up that would make an ending where he stays with them make a lot more sense because he is this fighter. He is intrinsically
he saved the little boy when he got wounded in the middle of the film.
Yeah, he's done all of these things to both win their trust and respect and show that he's brave and he's a good soldier and that he's wanting to help them so they trust him and they respect him. And it also would be a great outlet, unlike the stick fighting in Thailand. This would give him something that he could feel good about using his skills. But so it makes a lot of those setups that there are multiple ones throughout the film just kind of go, well, okay, well, you just kind of helped get your friend out and you just said, well, good luck, guys. Like,
and even if you look at First Blood, like it's a perfect sort of, if this is to be the end of the trilogy, to say like at the end of that movie, he's talking about like, how he could drive a tank, he could do all these things, but back in America, he can't even hold the job pumping gas. It's like, well, here's where he can use all those skills for good and feels like he belongs. Whereas in America, it's firmly established by the end of the first movie, he has no place there. So why would he want to go back there?
But if you think about it too, like, I mean, yes, I think that would have made this movie better overall because it would have given him like a really interesting kind of like new closure and like something new that's sort of like, wow, he's found his purpose. He did come full circle. And I think that's finding a way to use what you're good at in a way that you can feel good about is part of like leveling up as an adult and as a human. Like it's what we're all striving to do. And so it's sort of denied to him. However, I would say that if he had been written to do that, and like that was what was in the movie, I don't know how the film would hold up today because of, you know, the fact that the Taliban and whatnot.
Right.
Like, then it would be like Rambo would be sort of this thing that we couldn't keep making movies about. So I don't think Rambo 4 ever would have happened for a variety of reasons had that ending been in place. So because I love Rambo 4 so much, I'm happy that this movie ends the way it does.
So Rambo stayed behind, trained them to fight. They became the Taliban. They put up a fight with us. It all makes sense now.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little.
Kenny would like to ask, question for you guys on the panel. What was the best and worst thing about this film for you?
Matt?
The best thing was the Sega Genesis game, and the worst thing was the villain.
I definitely agree that the villain is probably the worst thing about this movie. As much as I know there was some, you know, animal cruelty that people like Britain certainly cut out a ton of stuff in their version of when they showed this, including some of the horse falls and stuff like that. But I do love seeing Stallone riding horseback in any movie because he's so good at it. And it's just, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And I will say I am an anomaly in that I like Rambo with long hair. So that's kind of fun.
Well, he had long hair in the first movie.
Yeah, but this is longer.
Yeah. Okay, so it's like rock star hair.
It's like rock star hair. He's
Michael. She's sending a message.
He's smoking
right?
hot. Like I'm just saying, he looks great.
I guess my favorite thing in this movie is the location work and the aesthetic of the locations.
Yes,
I think it's nice to see Rambo out of the jungle for once, because the Canadian woods, while not a jungle, they're still a green space. There's still he's taking advantage, and I like that. But I love seeing it change up a little bit with Rambo 3.
Yeah, it's nice also to see Rambo making the shift from just focusing on Vietnam and his own personal history with this whole war thing to sort of trying to help other people. Like during the course of this film, he sort of becomes aware of human atrocities that are being committed and, you know, helping others, which then again, as you mentioned, Matt, like carries over into the fourth film where he's really shining a light on what was happening in Burma. So,
people want to know, Jose wants to know, which of the 5 Rambos is your least favorite? For me, it's 5.
5, but if you're not counting that, because you really shouldn't, I would say it's 2.
2.
So
I think Stallone.
Steam 5, so I have to say 2. Just
we'll just pretend 5 doesn't exist because it's not really a Rambo movie. It's just sort of an action movie, in my opinion. But that's just my hot take. Stallone in the past has listed his ranking of the Rambo films, and that was before the 5th one came out, and he ranked them the same way I would, which is 1, 4, 3, 2. So I definitely think the first one is the best one, but I think the second one is, or I'm sorry, the fourth one is really good. Like,
yeah, the 4th one's excellent. It's an excellent movie.
I've seen it a lot. I've seen it like probably I've seen the first one the most, followed by the fourth one.
Drew, you need to go on the internet and check out the fact. Don't live in a bubble. Go on the internet and see what everybody says about Rambo 5.
Have you seen 5? Because it's really not good.
I haven't gotten around to it. I've just heard so many terrible things that.
Well, no, I mean, has Drew seen 5? Because he's. It's
Matt. Melinda is a huge Stallone fan, and I think even she would be willing to give up her copy of Rambo 5 so that you could see it. I mean, it is. We'll just send it to you. Like it's. I
don't like. I hate to say anything bad about Stallone. Like there are things about the movie that I do enjoy. And I remember when we watched it, it was a fun watch. Like just as like a roller coaster ride experience.
It's just not a good Rambo movie.
It's not a good Rambo movie. Like
if it was called like
it feels
Arizona
like Taken.
Man.
Yeah. It literally feels like Taken with Stallone, you know, and
retired psychopath. Like yeah.
Yeah, it's super violent, and some of the fight choreography and stuff in it is really impressive. Like I can see a love of action movies in every moment of this. Everyone who made this film clearly has like a good history with action movies, and so there are things about it that are good. But as a Rambo, like it's like he's not Rambo anymore. I don't know who he is, but he's not.
It's Frankenstein's monster. No, the thing is, Drew, is that if you're referring to the original theatrical cut, which only was shown in Australia and a few European countries, that's the Blu-ray that we sought out because we didn't want to see the cut down theatrical version when we heard about it.
Right.
So we're basing our judgment off of that cut. And note here, you say a little better. Nobody. Oh, it's astronomically better. No, it's marginally better, but
it's more about the character's arc, and like a lot of that part of it doesn't make any sense. Again, like the action stuff is good. It's just very like, why is he making the choices he's making? How? Anyway.
Yep. Yeah, and King Eric says, I don't like Rambo 5. It's coarse and rough and gets everywhere.
I was just watching Attack of Clones last night, so that's funny.
It's good stuff.
All right. Well, Guts has a little bit of information on 6. It says Rambo 6 is said to now be directly as a result of Part 5, where Stallone said he plans to have it set on a Native American reservation, as he does have Indian heritage and authorities can't enter there. So,
I mean, it seems like it should, like, isn't he dead at the end of, spoiler alert, at the end of 5?
Also,
no.
Isn't 5 called Last Blood?
It's called Last Blood.
He's literally sitting in a chair, just kind of like, he's all like messed up and shot.
Rambo 6 will be called Rambo 6. Psych! Kieran, I'm sorry that you missed Tony, but like we said, it was unavoidable. He's coming back, so...
Yeah, I mean, we're bummed that Tony didn't get to talk about this movie, because I know he was really excited to talk about this film, and I'm sure that his war experience in the Middle East would have been a boon for this discussion, but unfortunately, events beyond our control sort of dictated that we had
Tony's not locked in a closet over there with a gag on.
Nobody here is strong enough to restrain Tony. I'm sure Tony is bummed, but I think he's also probably grateful that we were able to. He was kind enough to give us his login stuff and trusted us to shepherd this panel to you guys, and hopefully it's been a fun discussion anyway.
Master Son, I know what you're doing.
I got your number, bro.
Hey, it's like Tony. We've been a lot better, but I feel like we did a lot good here today. We talked about Rambo 3, we talked about my hair, my knife.
Listen, I miss Tony too.
Yeah, so do I.
I wish that Tony was here as well.
We were with you, chat.
We agree with you,
Tony.
But it's sort of like, I feel like I am that fill-in host on the Johnny Carson show where everyone's like, oh, like I'm not gonna watch this one.
Well, it's like, what was the time when who was it that there was something happened where it was something with Metallica where James Hetfield got injured and couldn't be at the concert, and so they brought out somebody else. I think it was like Kid Rock or somebody, and he tried to sing Nothing Else Matters. And
I don't know. That was after
Michael, give us a little bit more credit.
Well, no, I'm just simply saying that's how some of these comments come across. It's like, look, guys,
I want to be a cowboy, baby.
It's like nobody remembers that I'm half of War Stories. It's like, oh, we just want to see Tony. So
it's understandable. I mean, I think you with Tony is a great combo.
I love this. Master Son's like, Tony could have given us all kinds of war truths in Rambo 3.
Yeah, like Master Son, you can give us some war truths, right? Like, where are you?
So, well, everybody, we are at time.
And on that horrible disappointment,
I know, right?
we're gonna have to.
And on that existential letdown for the entire audience, Rambo 3 and the co-hosts, it's time to slink off into the darkness and feel sad about ourselves.
#subpar.
That'd be the name of my autobiography, I guess.
I don't know about you, Matt, but I'm feeling very inspired to continue on my quest of doing more panels today. I'm going to keep sinking to lower levels of being subpar as the day continues. I'm functioning on a very small amount of sleep, but not, I mean, way more than Michael got. Because let me tell you, we went to bed at like 1 and he got up at 3. So
we weren't allowed to win this time.
we were not allowed to win this time.
I was sick last night, so I was up throughout the entire night. And so
great. I think that take all of that into consideration, guys. Like, we're here despite, rain, snow, sleet, and hail to entertain you. Yeah. And we're doing it all. We do it all for you. And just do remember that all of the super chats for this particular, we didn't say this before, and I apologize. All the super chats from this this live stream are going to be donated to our charity this year, our Canines for Warriors charity. So I do apologize for not saying that earlier. I should have. But so if you have any last minute super chats you'd like to give to the charity, you can go ahead and send those to Tony here, or you can make them directly to retroblasting@gmail.com and send that to us via PayPal. And we will definitely get that, make a little memo that it's for Canines for Warriors, and we will give that straight over to the charity at the end of the convention. So,
and thank you for the final super chat, Master Son, to our charity. He says, we love you, RetroBlasting and Matt. As you know, Master Son, I always love you back. You're one of the best people I know.
Yes. Yes.
Finish with Skeletor saying a Rambo quote. Oh my God, really?
How surreal does this feel to you right now?
I know, right? Back at home, I was in charge of $1 million equipment. Here, I can't even get a job washing cars. Like, yeah.
I'll give you a war you won't believe. There you go.
I'll give you a war you won't believe, He-Man. Great show, full stop. Thanks, Grindhead. And with that, I guess we will exit this stream, and we'll see you on the next one in the next Iconicon event, which is coming up. What is it? We're going to check the schedule right now. For those of you who are British in the chat, we're checking the schedule.
It is 90s G.I. Joe for your reconsideration. It's a premiere that's coming up at 11 a.m. Eastern time, so in 30 minutes. And then about an hour and a half from now, we will have Transformers in the 90s on Lio Convoy's channel. So he'll be talking about all those 90s Transformers that you guys love so much.
So 90s Joe's for your reconsideration is a 2 Cents Toys premiere.
Yeah, it's just a short 10-minute video.
That'll happen in 30 minutes.
That's right.
King Eric, thank you for the super chat. He says, loving Iconicon. Great job, guys.
Thank you so much for donating to our charity.
Grindhead Jim, oh yeah, great show, full stop. Thank you very much. All right, and I want to thank MattMovies611 for being here. If you did not see his last Starfighter retrospective, I highly encourage you to watch it. It is succinct and yet thoughtful, and it's just a great Iconicon video, just like his Tron retrospective was last year. I had a lot of fun watching it. It was excellent video, and please consider subscribing to MattMovies611.
Yeah.
And also, I know I'm not Tony, but
that's true. I also want to point out that you will see us again at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time for the Restoring Star Trek panel on Movie Oubliette's channel, where we will have 3 of the people who worked on that production, the producer, the post supervisor, and the visual effects supervisor for that 4K restoration that's just come out this year. So you won't want to miss that as well. So we got lots coming up.
3 o'clock today, you'll see me and Melinda on another stream that Tony was supposed to be on. And might not be.
He might be on it.
He might be.
It
But
just
if he's
depends
not-
on if he gets stuck in Washington. So we'll see. But
We'll
yeah,
see.
stay
You
tuned.
might see Tony,
You
Yeah.
might.
but you'll definitely see us. I don't know how the chat is going to feel about that.
If you like movies, you should really consider subscribing to MattMovies611. He's really great.
Oh, thank you.
Stay classy, San Diego.
Appreciate it.
Ron Burgundy. All right, so we're gonna sign off on this one, and we will thank you, Kieran, and we will see you on the next video coming soon from 2 Cents Toys in 30 minutes or 29 minutes. All right, we'll see you on the next one. Bye, everyone.
Bye.